My parents would have never allowed a real Ouija board in the house when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s. Sex, drugs and violence were fine as entertainment, but my seemingly unreligious parents had a weird distance between anything occult or what they would call satanic. So I may be 14, mid-90s, hanging out with my band. It was just two guys who didn't know how to play instruments, like me, and we just hung out and daydreamed about being rock stars. Think Wild Stallion from Bill and Ted. We got on the subject of witchcraft and Ouija boards came up. I got a rectangle of cardboard and made the most crude Ouija board I could from memory. I had the idea to make one after hearing from a goth chick on the bus that they could be more powerful that way. So we made a little planchette out of some thicker cardboard and we got to seancing. The other guys had only seen them in stores like me, so we kind of just put things on as we remembered them. As we asked the standard, "Are you there?" questions, the planchette moved and we got answers that made no sense. Seemingly random letters and a few numbers that didn't form any words or anything meaningful. We all assumed that one of us was sabotaging the whole thing. With zero hesitation, the planchette darted to the moon and then just as quickly over to the sun image. It felt like we almost lost our place on the planchette because it was definitely moving on its own. And then it slowly spelt out DESREVER before making 3 quick circles around the centre of the board counterclockwise and darting to goodbye. Then I asked if there's anything we could do to help us understand. We all kind of just sat there with our mouths open for a minute. The bass player said, "I only remembered to write down the last letters that it gave us. What does Des Rever mean?" Me, being the first year French language student, thought it said Des River, and I confidently assumed it meant the rivers, but I knew I had no clue. Then the keyboard player says, "Guys, Des River is reversed in reverse." What the fuck? We left to see for ourselves if we had the sun and the moon reversed. We walked down to the nearest department store. Sure enough, the one that we made was damn near perfect to the one in the store except for one major detail. The sun and the moon were indeed incorrectly placed on my homemade Ouija board. We ran home promptly and burnt it in the fireplace. Fuck that. Never again. One Saturday night in 1997, at a cool dad's house with my friend Amanda, a very fun group of my teenage friends, about 8 of us, were playing with a Ouija board in groups of 4, taking turns and watching what we thought was just a silly rite of passage for us to take place. We were having a blast. We were lightly underage drinking and smoking weed. It was late when the super freaky stuff started to happen. We were all wide awake because the game took weird turns, and I can remember seeing 2:22 AM because I looked over at my friend's family's CVR and it displayed the time. That's when one of the guys, Ryan the smart ass, asked who in the room would be first to die and how. I was watching and witnessing this. My hand was not on the planchette. I remember we all were like, "Dude, why?" The planchette moved to the letter U and stopped. Ryan laughed and said, "Okay, how?" The planchette moved to spell out CARCRAS, and that's when my friend Amanda, whose house it was, said, "Okay, we're done now," and proceeded to turn on the lights and blow out candles near her. Ryan was the only one still sitting there staring at the board, sort of half laughing and also sort of freaked out. I watched him space out for a moment and thought I was maybe too high, but I wasn't. Because we all sort of stopped smoking around about 2 AM because of all the weird shit. And it was a very strange feeling at the time. We all went outside and laid in the summer grass. And somewhere in the moment, some of us fell asleep outside or wandered back inside to crash. Smash cut to about 3 months later. Ryan dies in a car wreck near our school. It happened on a Saturday night driving back with his girlfriend from a movie. She survived. Didn't see the semi-truck on a curve as he pulled out of the side road to turn into the main road back into town. Still gives me chills. Other shit happened that night. Candles would not stay lit on a warm, calm summer night inside the house with the AC off and the windows open. But we were all freaked out about Ryan, and Price still are to this day. Yes, he was a smart ass, but still that spaced out look he had right afterwards made me think he wasn't moving the planchette around that time. This happened a long time ago when I was around 12 or 13. My grandmother had passed away when I was 9 from lung cancer. Around 2 years later, my grandfather remarried and moved in with his new wife. The home he lived in, where my mother grew up, was in an area that was being demolished for the nearby airport development within the next few years. Being that it was so close, he asked my mum if we would like to move in for free until it was torn down. Growing up, I was extremely close with my grandmother and I missed her a lot. While going through old things in the basement, I came across an old Ouija board. When asking my mother about it, she had remembered her and her sister using it in the 70s, so this is one of the first editions. At that age, I had a brilliant idea of using it to connect with my grandmother. At first, I only used it with friends and cousins with nothing much happening, until one day I decided to use it by myself. When speaking to the board, it first claimed to be my grandmother, but when I pressed for facts it would get them wrong. It soon told me it was a very old spirit. It was then it started to count down, and so I got spooked and said goodbye, taking the planchette and putting the board back in the basement. Now, during the times I had used it with my friends, we did see some weird things, such as shadows out the corner of our eyes. And one friend even witnessed a woman standing over me while sleeping in the middle of the night. After that last encounter, things got scary. At one point, while laying in bed, waiting for sleep, one of my cats was laying with me and she abruptly got up and ran out of the room. The shadows were becoming more predominant. Our pets, we had 5, became more spooked in areas that were normally their comfort zones. And I started constantly getting a feeling I was being watched by something very dark. When I sat up and called for her, I saw a dark shadow of a man standing in the doorway of my room. Being the genius preteen I was, I threw the covers over my head and laid there until morning. The second most frightening encounter was when I was in the computer room playing the games, and another cat who was always on top of the chair ran out and hid in the den right outside the room. At first I thought it was my father, but this shadow was above 6 foot tall and my dad is barely 5'5", so I quickly knew this was something else. She was a very brave cat, so this was abnormal. I went out and tried to coax her back, but to no avail. Went back to playing my Sims. Now, when going into that room, the first thing you see is a table with boxes underneath it and about a 1 foot gap between the boxes and the table. When I went back into that room, underneath the table was the most menacing evil face I have ever seen staring right back at me. I immediately left the room. Thankfully, shortly after those encounters happened, we moved out and the house was torn down with the Ouija board inside. I never experienced anything after that in our new home, but I will never use a Ouija board again to this day. I played one with my little brother when we were kids. The planchette was moving so smoothly and directly to the letters I was absolutely certain he was doing it, but he kept insisting that he wasn't. I was sure he was bullshitting me because I knew that I wasn't moving it. Then he takes his hand completely off, and I felt it continue pulling me towards the last letters we got. With only my hand on it, I am certain I was not pushing it. I felt an external force pulling against, away from my side. That freaked me out and I put the board away. He, of course, took what happened as proof that I had cheated. I was very chilled by the experience and frustrated that he would not believe me. So I had an interesting experience with one. Did a Ouija board when I was probably about 14. I was with a group of friends and little romantic me asked it who I would marry. I was the only one in the group that got a response. It's spelled out W-I-L. One L. Very specific. I assumed one of my girlfriends in the group was messing with me because there was a Will in our class who I didn't really like all that much. Well, fast forward a few years later and I started dating a Wilson who goes by a Will. We are now married. I made the connection about the Ouija board about a year ago, and my mind is a bit blown, to be honest. Also, I don't recommend doing a Ouija board. I was young and dumb and haven't done one since. I cringe when I think about it, about the fact I used one.